Hey, joyful wife. Today, let's talk about reframing your negative thoughts about your marriage. You can change how you actually see your marriage on a daily basis. I spent years convinced that my husband was the source of my unhappiness until I realized that he was actually one of my greatest teachers on this side of eternity. And if you're feeling frustrated, disconnected, or wondering why you married someone who seems so determined to push every single button, then this video is going to help you to see how you can completely transform your perspective. Today, I want to share a few thought reframing techniques that helped me to see that my marriage was an environment for growth rather than a daily battlefield, and how discovering what triggers me is actually an opportunity and pathway to develop a deeper love and a more unconditional love for myself and for him. As always, I'd like to add the disclaimer that this channel is more for people that feel disconnected or struggle with communication or emotional regulation. This is not the channel for anyone that's going through any current abuse, adultery, addiction. I highly recommend, if that is something that's currently going on in your marriage, that you reach out to a professional therapist or counselor to get that under control before you move on to these techniques. Not that these wouldn't help you, but there is a more of a major problem that needs to be dealt with. A huge shift that changed just the way that I see life in general is this is being done to me versus this is being done for me. And I remember when I was 25, newly divorced from my first marriage, living on someone's back porch, and I just that kept thinking, like, I was just dealt a bad hand of cards and everything happens to me. I was in a very victimized mentality. And a friend of mine said, "What if this is happening for you? Like, what could you learn? How could you grow?" And while I didn't appreciate it at the time, it changed my entire life, because if something wasn't happening to me and it was happening for me, then I could start asking questions like, how is this for me? How can I use this for me? And how can I change my life using exactly what I have in front of me versus the other questions, more disempowering questions of, why is this happening to me? Why do I have to deal with this? Do you see how they're a little bit different there? When your husband leaves his dirty clothes next to the hamper, or he forgets an important date, or maybe he withdraws during a conflict, your brain's automatic response is to see his behavior as something that's being done to you personally. This creates a victim mentality where you're constantly reacting to his perceived attacks rather than responding thoughtfully to what some might even consider a very neutral situation, or one that doesn't bother them at all. I've had many instances where my brain offered me this thought that he just doesn't care about me, he doesn't care about what matters to me. And I could always feel the familiar resentment rising. My jaw becomes tight, I clench my teeth, that burning sensation in my chest and face. I start feeling really hot. My brain starts going crazy. And these are all indicators that I have just been triggered by something. And that something may not even be an actual factual story. And instead of launching into my usual passive aggressive tone, maybe slamming things, I learned to pause and ask myself a different question. What if this situation is happening for me and not to me or against me? What might I be able to learn here? This simple shift really completely changed my emotional state. When I get my prefrontal cortex back online, it calms down my body in a way that if I kept ruminating on thoughts, that just wouldn't happen. So instead of feeling victimized, I become very curious. And maybe this is an opportunity that I can practice communicating what I'm wanting in the moment clearly. Maybe it's teaching me that my worth isn't determined by someone else's ability to remember a date or an activity. Maybe it's showing me where I still expected my husband to be reading my mind. So you can start implementing these reframing techniques and even the pause with this guide that I've created specifically for those triggering moments in marriage or really any life situation. This quick practice helps you to interrupt the automatic negative thoughts and really shift into a growth mindset almost immediately. I have gone ahead and linked it in the description, but also will pin to the comments once this video is posted so it's easy for you to find. It's been absolutely transformative for so many of the women that I work with. Another really powerful reframe is going from he should know better, and I say should, capitalize, 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 because when I use that word, I know that my thinking is not correct. So from he should know better to we have different processing styles. We have different ways of thinking, whatever it might be for you. So, how many times in your marriage or life have you thought he should be more responsive? He should be more engaged with what I'm saying. These should statements create a massive disconnection because they're always based on this false premise that your husband's communication styles work exactly like yours do. I used to get so frustrated when my husband would go silent when we were having important conversations. In my mind, he should participate actively. He should be sharing his thoughts just like I do. But I'm an external processor, and that means I think by talking things out and really out loud, and I need to verbalize my thoughts to understand them fully. For years, I interpreted his silence as he's just not interested in our marriage or communication, or he's avoiding or he's shutting down. But eventually, I learned that my husband is not an external processor, he's an internal processor. And he really needs time and space to sort through his thoughts before he expresses them. When I would push him for an immediate response, I was actually making it a lot harder for him to communicate effectively. His quietness wasn't rejection, it was his natural way of processing information deeply before he was speaking. I needed to create a safe space for him to do that, or else it would just stay internal for him. Understanding this difference, it really helps me to see his intentions more accurately. And when I reframed his silence as his way of taking our conversation seriously rather than avoiding it, I could suddenly appreciate his thoughtfulness instead of resenting his quietness. Now I'm able to give him the time that he needs, and in return, I get more considerate, meaningful responses. The only way for me to give him that time was for me to learn to pause since I was pretty external and explosive. This is where that emotional reset guide really comes in handy because it gives you a structured way to pause when you're triggered by understanding the differences between you and your husband. And in that pause, you can remind yourself that we're different, not defective. His response and his processing style isn't wrong, it's just different than mine is. This is a very small mental shift that helps diffuse the emotional charge that I would have, and it creates that space for genuine understanding and communication. If there was one reframe that I know you need to hear, it's moving from I need him to change to my triggers are my teachers. Every time our husband does something that sends us into emotional tailspin, he's actually highlighting an unhealed part of ourselves that is really seeking attention. And this doesn't mean his behavior is always appropriate. When we have an outsized reaction, often it's connected to deeper wounds that maybe he didn't cause. This is where emotional regulation becomes super crucial. You need to be able to establish a way to calm your nervous system enough to see your triggers clearly for what they actually are. When you view your triggers as teachers rather than torments, your marriage becomes a powerful pathway to healing and growth. Have you ever been in a home that's not yours and you walk into a dark room and you can't see anything and you don't know where the furniture is going to trip you up, but then you find the light switch and you just flip it on and you're able to see things clearly. Well, this reframe is a lot like that. And it's understanding or going from he needs to meet my needs or he doesn't meet my needs to no human being is designed to fulfill all my needs. We've all absorbed this romantic myth, thanks to 90s rom-coms, that our spouse should be our everything, our best friend, our passionate lover, our engaged co-parent, our financial partner, our emotional support system, our spiritual companion, and then our exciting travel buddy. Maybe there's a few marriages like that, and yay if that's for you, but that is not the case for about 90% of marriages that I have seen personally. Really, that's an impossible standard that crushes marriages under its weight. I spent the first 5 years of our marriage just super disappointed about how my husband wasn't meeting all of my emotional needs. I wanted deep conversation, but he was more comfortable with practical conversations, maybe about like TV shows or movies he's seen, or maybe on a smaller level. And I craved words of affirmation, but he showed love through physical touch. And I needed frequent reassurances, but he assumed that love was understood unless it was stated otherwise. The breakthrough that came when I realized that no single human being, not even the perfect spouse, could possibly meet all my complex needs. It really just gave life to our marriage because I didn't have to look at him for all of that. Some needs are meant to be met by friends, some by family members, some by community, some by ourselves, some by our spouse. But for me, a lot of my needs are met by God. When I stopped expecting my husband to be my everything, I could appreciate the ways that he actually brought value and support into my life. Now, this reframe doesn't mean that you're settling for an unfulfilling relationship. It means developing a healthy network and support and taking responsibility for your own emotional well-being. This prevents the dangerous pattern of emotional dependency that puts an impossible pressure on your marriage and your husband. Okay, so here's another big reframe that I see needs to happen. And that's going from love should feel easy to love is a skill and an action, a verb, however you want to state it, that I am developing. Our culture sells us this idea, and I think it's pretty dangerous, that when you find the one, love should flow effortlessly. Arguments and misunderstandings and periods of disconnection are seen as signs that something is fundamentally wrong with the relationship, and that sets you up for perpetual disappointment. When my husband and I had a really rough patch during year 7 of our marriage, I seriously questioned if we were even right for each other. If we were truly meant to be together, shouldn't it be easier than this? Shouldn't love just naturally flow between us? This thought pattern had me constantly questioning everything in our relationship rather than taking the time to invest in it. The turning point came when I realized that love isn't something that happens to you. It's an action word that I get to do, that I get to practice. Like any meaningful skill, it requires practice, mistakes, corrections, and then even more practice. My husband's differences, his triggers, and his flaws weren't obstacles to love. They were the very conditions under which I am learning to love more deeply and more intentionally. Approaching love as a skill completely changed how I view the challenges in my marriage. And instead of seeing conflicts as evidence that something is wrong, we can start seeing them as opportunities to practice to becoming more patient, more understanding, and more selfless. Every button your husband pushes becomes another chance to choose love over reacting. So these reframes that we've talked about are all things that I have practiced and continue practicing in other relationships as well as my marriage. But they not only completely have transformed the way I see my marriage, but how I experience it on a daily basis. And as you practice from the shifting of happening to me, the victim mentality to the student, it's happening for me, from judgment to understanding, you'll start seeing that your husband isn't the obstacle. He's your greatest opportunity for growth. Start with just one reframe this week. Remember that changing how you see your marriage changes everything about how you experience it. And that change can start right now with your very next thought. If this video resonated with you, be sure to check out my other video. It's going to be either on this side or this side. I'm really kind of new to this YouTube thing, so I got to figure out how to do that. But it's about the behaviors that end connection in your marriage, where I talk about more practical ways to regulate your emotions in challenging moments. I've linked it in the comments below as well, just so you can find it easier. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss next week's video on why your husband withdraws and how you can draw him back to you. Let me know in the comments which of these reframes you're going to practice first.